A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 82.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass. Living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren, and today's episode, A Kick in the Ass Manifesto.
Kick in the ass.
You like that?
Well, welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom. You know, I think when people hear the word manifesto, they might think of what the Unabomber, right?
Or some political action, right?
Yeah, some political action. But really, what a manifesto is all about, it's about creating a vision.
Right.
And right,
showing your intentions and your motives, and it's just either it can be verbal or it can be written down, and we're applying it to goal setting. You know, we talk about a lot about the building blocks of goals here, right, John? Right. And so this is a way of having the ultimate outcome, the ultimate vision for what you want to achieve. It's not the goal itself; it's a long-term, vision.
Yeah, and I think too, a manifesto can also kind of communicate what you're all about. You know, maybe why you're doing it, or it can be very specific to you. You know, I think a lot of people screw up is when they try to make changes in their life, is they try to do it all at once, and try to get there all in one big step, but positive change really doesn't happen that way very often. I think it happens, you have a greater chance of achieving your goals if you take small, calculated steps, and actually small, measured steps. And the reason why I say measured is because you want to make sure that you know when you're reaching your goals. When you set out a specific goal, to say, just financial goals are probably the easiest because there's a number attached to it. To say, I want to save $10,000. That is a very specific goal that you know how far you've come. You know, if you want to save $10,000 and you only have $1 saved, you know you have a long way to get there. But if you measure it and maybe make very small, manageable, reachable goals, to say you're going to save $100 a month, then you know exactly how long that will take you to get to, in theory, to get to $10,000. And you also have a better gauge to say, yes, I've met this, or no, I haven't. But it's all creating, just saying that you want to be rich, or that you want to have free time, or some type of vague statement, isn't necessarily going to get you where you want to go.
No, but it could be a vision for them. And I was talking to you before the show how my ultimate vision for me 5 years from now is to live in an RV and be able to cruise around in America and work with location independence without having to be tied down to a job, and being able to go out. And I have some obvious ideas for how I'm going to do this. And I'm also I have goals. I have some of those building blocks in place that are already happening. We've talked about how I do the stairs daily now. I do five flights of stairs 20 times. It's 100 stairs every day. And part of that reason, not only to get in shape and be healthy and so forth, there's a lot of reasons I do it. But one of them is my foresight in the future of wanting to go out and take hikes and be able to maybe have retreats where me and John get together and we deal with motivation and so forth, but we also take people out of their element and bring them into nature and do something exciting. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I got to be in shape. I got to be ready to be able to hike. So I've started now, and it's something that I do constantly. And I was thinking about this earlier, John. There's different types of goals too, because the two biggest
Absolutely.
challenges that I've conquered, the one is being the stairs where, it's a healthy activity and I move. But the other activity, other thing that was not an activity was like giving up something. And that's when I gave up Diet Coke. And that was, it's been several years since I did that. And I don't have to it's more like a passive goal. I don't have to do anything but have willpower every once in a while. And honestly, I don't even desire it anymore. So it's, once in a blue moon, if I see someone eating a pizza or something, they have some soda, I'll be like, oh, that'd be nice. But no, I'll have some water instead or something.
So let me ask you this, Tom. Do you ever relapse?
No,
Ever?
I have not relapsed once. When I first started trying, I've tried several times to give up Diet Coke. And I think with that, it was one of those things where I had to go cold turkey. I tried to say, okay, I'm only going to do, and like, trying to follow our advice about taking small steps. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to only drink it like around dinner, or when we go out or something
Okay.
like that. But that didn't seem to work because then before you know it, I was drinking more of it. And I think that's with any goal. It's like smoking. I think it's hard to just, go out and have,
Yeah.
I'm going to limit myself to one. You got to do cold turkey sometimes. Just, cut the cord and go for it. And that's what worked. And that's what was able to, and now as it builds up, I wouldn't want to relapse because I'd be like all that. Now I can say that, for 2 or however 3 years, I forget however long it is now that I haven't had one, that it's, that I don't want to give that up. It'd be like when you go to a Alcoholics Anonymous or a 10-step program. They give you little coins or they give you some kind of trinket that says or medallion that says I've done this. I've been sober for 30 days now. I've been sober for 60 days. I've been sober for a year. And those guys don't want to lose that because it represents something very important to them. And I think that's the same thing. So yeah, that's a different kind of goal. It's not something like when I go to the stairs, some days I don't feel like doing it. And it's like, I got to motivate, it's like, I want to do it because mentally it makes me feel better at the end, but sometimes it's hard. But with giving up something, I think it's a little easier unless you put yourself in those situations. If you're, an alcoholic, obviously you don't want to be hanging out at bars and so forth because that's going to be a difficult situation. I have a friend that he doesn't go to like big gatherings where there's going to be alcohol because he doesn't even want the temptation. So he puts himself away from those circles.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a risk factor that you have to consider. I gave up smoking cigarettes. Gosh, I think it's over 18 or 19 years for me. And, I feel the same way about it. But um, I, I guess I recognize that even after so much time, all I'd have to do is give in once to say, I'll have a cigarette and I would be back at a pack a day. We really don't unlearn behaviors. Once we learn a behavior and it becomes a habit, we don't really unlearn it. You don't forget how to drink Diet Coke. You don't forget
No,
how
because
to smoke
it's
a
still,
cigarette.
I'm sure if I had a glass, it would still kick in that dopamine rush where you're like,
Yeah,
hey, this is good.
yeah.
And
You'd pick right back up probably where,
right.
where
And
you left off.
and
Like
sometimes you
said,
justify. Yeah.
yeah, like you try to set up some rules around it. And I remember when I was trying to quit smoking, before I did it cold turkey, I would try to set up rules. And I had one friend in particular who smoked one cigarette a day, and that was at the end of the day. After everything was over with, he would have a cigarette, and that was it. And that was all it ever was. I was never able to do that, so not saying it's not possible, but I think for most people, once you make up your mind to change your behavior, um, you have to be in it to win it and recognize why you're making that change, and recognize that one day down the road, 1 year down the road, 20 years down the road, those reasons why you quit are going to be just as valid. Where people are successful is that with creating positive change, especially in regards to habits, is replacing a habit. So instead of I don't really know what I replaced cigarettes with. it was just something I really wanted to do. I guess I worked out at the time I was working out, but that seems really counterproductive, doesn't it? When you're, you know, when you're exercising or working out, and then you have a cigarette.
John, and it may seem trivial when, I'm talking about giving up Diet Coke. It's not like I'm, drinking alcohol or doing something that's super destructive to my body that I know of. But, I was drinking so much, I was consuming so much of it. Like I'd wake up in the morning, it was my coffee. And then I would have one on the way to work. I would drink it with breakfast. I'd drink it with lunch. I'd drink it, after working out. I would drink it all the time. And it was something that kind of ruled my life. There's a quote by Buddha, of all people. And it says, it's better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles, then the victory is yours. It cannot be taken from you, not by angels or by demons, heaven or hell. And I love that quote because it's true. It's a win. And when I look back, I can say, if there's one thing, I was able to beat that addiction and I was able to overcome it. So that gives me credibility with myself to be able to try something else. It's the same thing when I do the stairs. It's every day I go, every day I'm there, and, I have accountability. I've built in my own form of accountability where I post a picture on Facebook every day of the sky or the sunset from the top of the tower. I don't say I'm sitting there running. I don't show off how many steps I've done. I just put that out there. It's for myself. It's not for anyone else. People think that I love that park or that, I must work there, but it's not that. It's for myself to hold myself accountable.
So when people talk about changing behaviors, and we started out, the topic of today's episode is about the building blocks for kick-ass or manifesto. We're really talking about vision as well as changing behavior. So what we really need to think about is, are we trying to create some kind of temporary change in behavior? Maybe you want to lose 20 pounds or something, or maybe you're saving up to buy something special for your girlfriend or your boyfriend. So you're talking about a temporary change. Maybe you're trying to cut back, on your expenses so you can afford something special. That would be something temporary. But I think what you and I are talking about too is a true lifestyle change. And the question is, how do people change? People can talk good talk about wanting to change, but unless you put it into action, you don't stand a chance to change. And even when you put it into action, it doesn't just happen overnight. In fact, they say that true change does not occur until you've actually not been doing that behavior for a year. You're less likely to relapse actually after about a year's worth of time.
And John, it can go to, you could take those little goals. Say someone wants to lose weight to fit into a dress or what have you. However, it can fit into a bigger overall scheme because they could be also, saying I want to lose weight just because, they're perceived different when they go to work, because someone that's heavier or something like that, they might not feel confident, or they might worry about how other people perceive them. So it might be, it's also, they might have heart disease that runs through their family and they want to be around for their children or their grandchildren. It could be a lot of different things. It might be a short-term goal, but I think they're more likely to stick with it if they envision all the benefits and all the things that are, or where it is in that manifesto, how that applies to them of reaching their goal. I think if they have that vision, it will help pull those small goals together, like you said, like building blocks.
Yeah, and what you said makes a lot of sense. I think the dress example is great. So if the vision is that you're living a healthier life, what does that mean? It means you're fit, I guess, is the way, one way of looking at living a healthy life.
But you could think about this. I want to lose weight. I want to be sexier. I want to be, right. I want to get more whoop-a-doo-a-doo, and it's there's so many things that, like in my case, when I'm exercising, that's a side effect. But it's also, I do a Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it makes my jiu-jitsu better because I'm stronger on the mat. I have better cardio.
Yeah. So, I mean, the vision that you have in your head, um, unless you start getting very specific, just saying I want to be healthy, you need to ask yourself what that really means. And for me, going back to the dress example, I think that is a very good short-term goal that fits into the bigger picture to say, I have a wedding that's coming up. I want to look really hot, in that dress. And in order to do that, I need to lose a certain amount of weight, so I can fit into that dress or that suit, if you're a guy.
Right. And think the vision of being healthy, right? It's like you said, that's one of the building blocks is maybe to exercise. Another building block is eating better. The other building block is sleeping good. Another one for being healthy is visiting your doctor and getting, regular checkups, going to the dentist. I mean, there's so many different aspects that start to expand out in order to encompass health. Because you could be like a bodybuilder that's full of drugs, right? That's not healthy. They look great, they look healthy, but they're not healthy. So there's all these different building blocks in order to reach that ultimate pinnacle of what you call health.
Yeah, actually, before there's a lot of work that goes on, or a lot of action that takes place, or a lot of action that actually takes place before change actually occurs. And what we're talking about right now is really the pre-contemplative stage of change. You haven't actually taken action, but you're thinking about what you want, and what you want that change to look like in the end.
And that includes John sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen and actually writing it out.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is true. Writing it out is important, and it's very interesting. And I know I've mentioned this on the show probably many, many times, but there's something subconscious that goes on when you write things down. What it does is it basically turns a thought, which is something intangible. We can't touch it. We can't touch a thought. But by writing it down, we make it tangible. We make it real. And there's something that our mind connects with when we do that. So, if you are interested in change, I do recommend writing it down. I think that will help you subconsciously. You'll start moving towards that goal in ways and start making decisions that move you towards that goal, sometimes without you even knowing it. Now, going back to the vision part, I have a good friend of mine who, for the last 7 years, has been renting an apartment. He had a townhouse before, but he sold it so he could move to another state entirely, and he did that, and he's back in Florida now, and he's been back for 7 years, and he's been living in this apartment. Well, he wants to buy a house. That's his vision. He wants to be a homeowner again, but he's been grown so comfortable in his current apartment that he knew he needed to do something drastic. And what that really meant is that boiled down to finances, to say he was spending too much money on his 2-bedroom apartment, and it's just him. So he needed to downsize. He needed to cut his rent in half. He came up with a list of things that he needed to accomplish in order to save enough money to have a down payment on a house. So we were just talking about this recently, and his lease was up for this apartment, and he began looking for another place, and he found a place that was really a step down for him. The apartment was not as nice. It was not in a desirable neighborhood. In fact, kind of in a scary neighborhood. But he recognizes that he just needs a year of saving money in order to get enough money for the down payment for a house. So he wrote down, and he was willing to make a sacrifice in order to do that. Now, in talking with people who are making changes like that in their life, it might seem like they're making a huge sacrifice, especially where safety is concerned. If you're downsizing and you're going to not such a nice area, um, you know, life is going to be different, and your lifestyle and the way you live is definitely going to be impacted by a change like that. But he has this vision in his head of being a homeowner once again, and by reducing the cost, his monthly expenses, he'll be able to put that money away, and he'll reach his goal. So it's a short-term sacrifice for a much longer-term vision. Um, are
Susie
you willing to do that?
Susie,
are our listeners willing to do that?
right? It's interesting because Susie Orman, who's the famous financial advisor, right? That's one of her biggest tenets. She always says you can downsize. So if you're stressed out or if you're in over your head, downsize. If you have a huge house, sell the house, get a smaller house, get a smaller apartment like your friend did. There's always ways, usually, to downsize if you look at your life and say, really, do I need this? What do I, you can always scale back.
Yeah, the issue, I think, is bigger than that, though. It deals with your happiness and what you want out of life. And let's just face it, life isn't always easy. People, we just don't always get what we want. Things don't happen the way we want them to happen. Life happens that way.
And that's determined by the Rolling Stones, by the way. Can't always get what you want.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think life happens is my phrase. But, it doesn't matter what position you're in. If and my friend and I were actually talking about this. Added as part of his situation, he has a Ford Mustang, and it has a lot of miles on it. It has 190,000 miles on it, I think. And I don't know what your car it is, but it's a later model. It's not like a 1966 Mustang. This is like a 2003 or 2005 or something like this. This car is starting not to run right. So he's worried about what might happen with his plans and how that might impact his plans. Whereas, and isn't that always the case, to where you start moving towards a goal in taking, recognizing that you have to take incremental steps, and you plan it out, and, you can plan out, say, by making this change, I'm going to save this much money. I'm going to get this out of it. I'm going to get this out of it. I'm going to get that out of it. But life has a way of throwing these twists and turns at us. So we're talking about what happens if his car breaks down. And we recognize that you're going to have to deal with whatever life throws at you. But when you're trying to make positive change in your life, it might mean that you need to get creative, and you might not be able to solve problems the way you used to solve problems. When my wife and I, were just starting to get traction on our financial plan, this happened to me. My daughter set our microwave on fire. Our refrigerator stopped cooling properly. I was facing losing all this food in the refrigerator. The dishwasher handle broke off, so we had to use like a vice grips to open up.
You're like an episode of the middle. You're like an episode of The Middle.
It was terrible, and on top of it, my wife's van needed like brakes and rotors and stuff like that. And I remember thinking and talking to the guy who's now moving. I'm expecting all the sympathy, because I was actually getting over mono at the time. So I was just totally drained of energy. I was, getting over an illness and not feeling good to begin with. And it felt like the world was crashing around me. But what was good, and the silver lining in it, was that we were finally getting some traction on our financial plan. We were finally starting to pay off our debts. And that was great. But all these things were happening all at once. And I was telling my friend about it and expecting some sympathy. And his answer was, life happens. So I guess it's not really my phrase so much, but my friend's phrase that
John, it's so true. That was my weekend. My sewer pipes clogged right now, so I couldn't.
That's crappy.
Yes, it's a bad situation. I had it snaked last week, and it's clogged again. So obviously, I have a problem, like a root or something growing in there. And so I called out the company again, and they didn't show because it started raining. Right, so it was raining and raining. And while it's raining, all of a sudden I discover I have a freaking roof leak. So it's like things pile on top of you and you're just like, hey, I just got to deal with it. I just got to, keep moving forward and make the most of it.
Yeah. And it's really easy to get down about that. But when you have a vision, when you have a manifesto in place, a vision of what you want to accomplish and why you want to accomplish it, that can help you get through the more difficult times when life throws you these curveballs. The fact remains is that when these things get thrown at us, it's not really a choice of ours. If we had to choose, we would choose to avoid those type of situations. I'm sure you would choose to avoid having a roof leak. You would choose to avoid having a sewer issue. But life doesn't work that way. We don't always get what we want.
All I have to say is usually those things happen when we have a party. I used to have a septic tank, and every time we had a party, man, that the septic tank, something would happen where it would fill up, and all of a sudden we can't flush the toilets. We have a whole bunch of people coming over, and it's an emergency. You have to pay $500 in order to get the thing drained real quick. It's horrible.
Yeah, it just
or the air conditioning will break when you have guests over, and it's like, oh, it's not usually this hot, I promise. Yeah.
Wasn't it? I think it was John Lennon who was attributed to saying, when man makes plans, God laughs. I think that's one of his sayings, or at least attributed to him.
And anyone that's done like a presentation or have spoke in front of people know that that's the way it goes too. I mean, you could work so hard to have this presentation down pat, and you get there and the PowerPoint doesn't work, or the laptop doesn't work with the projector that they have in the room, or whatever it may be. These things there's always a monkey wrench that's thrown in.
Yeah. So the way to avoid that is to, first of all, recognize that those things happen, and recognize that those things are beyond your control for the most part. So focus on what you can change, what you can control. If you're doing a presentation, you can have backup copies. You can have paper copies prepared of your presentation.
You can go before in the venue before you have to set up and do a practice dry run, make sure all the equipment works. But sometimes that's not possible. I just know that because from doing live broadcast all over the place at work, sometimes you cannot get in until almost before you're ready to go on the air. And it's just a hurry up and pray it works.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. You can take some ways, you can try to be proactive, but sometimes you don't know what you're facing until you actually get there. And then you have to manage the situation the best that you can. So definitely planning is good. It's good to think about what may or may not happen, and recognize that we as a people typically think in extremes. We think in either the worst case scenario or the best case scenario. And reality is that on either side of the extreme, the likeliness of that happening is statistically very low, either, best case or worst case. Reality occurs somewhere in the middle, and probably some combination of, best and worst. But it's up to you how you manage that and how you can plan on it.
There's nothing wrong with building fudge factor, right? I know it's a weird word, but some space within
Especially
when you're
when you're
making a
talking
goal.
about sewers, Tom.
Yeah, I know. I was teasing my friend the other day. We were trying to snake it ourselves at first and went to Home Depot and rented it. I came out and I had some Hershey Kisses and I was like, is this wrong to be eating this right now?
Yes.
um, but
But
besides that, let me go back to my daily stairs routine, right? I know as of training and exercising, over the course of my life that you need downtime. It's not good to train every day, but I do. I have it scheduled for every day. But what that has done is built in the times for when I cannot go, for when I have something at my son's school or I have an appointment that I'm not going to make it that day, or there's a thunderstorm rolls out. I have that built in. So if I miss that day, it's a rest day. It's no big deal. I needed it anyways. Sometimes those go, a long time before that happens, or sometimes I'll voluntarily take one off. But for the most part, I've built that in. So I make that daily habit. And if I miss it, it's not a big deal. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel bad. It's just like, good. I could use the rest.
As you know from recent episodes, I've had hand surgery recently, as well as I had 2 herniated discs.
That's all from that porn episode?
No, that was the sticky situation episode. No, it had nothing to do with my friends told me that the way slipping having a near fall in a parking lot is not very interesting. It's not an interesting way to injure yourself. They said that I should embellish the story and say that I injured it through a sexual activity. That's a lot more exciting and it piques people's interests better. So yeah, think whatever you want to think. Yeah, I threw out my back from these wild sexual activities.
Well, I had a friend at work, and similar to you, he was walking across a floor that had just been mopped in a club. He was on a live broadcast. He was the engineer, and there was a table set up of donuts, and he was already done to setting up the broadcast. So he's like, "Ooh, donut," So he started to walk across, and he slipped, but he caught himself same way. But it was enough to tweak whatever happened in his vertebrae or his back, or something happened and screwed the guy up like big time. And he said that was the most expensive donut that he ever tried to get. And I don't even think he even ended up getting the donut. He was in such pain.
Yeah, no, it's but anyhow, when you injure yourself, at that time I was feeling great. Probably I felt the best I had ever felt in my life before that injury. And then I injured myself. And I think that was about 4 months ago. And life changed. And I went from going push-ups, at least 50 push-ups a day, sometimes more than that. Most days I was doing several sets of 50 push-ups a day. I was in good shape. I had changed my diet, so I was feeling great. And then, bam, I have this near fall, and it just put me on the sideline. My leg was tingling all the way down from my hip all the way to my toes. Some of the most extreme pain I think I've ever experienced. It was hell. It sidelined me. And then as I got some steroid injections to help with that. And then I had hand
And now
surgery.
you're huge?
What was that?
Now you're huge?
Huge.
Steroid.
No, that's different type of steroid. Sorry. But I'm just now starting to get back into exercise. And I think a lot of people, when they start making trying to create positive change in their life, they try to get everything all at once. And there's no way I can get back to where I was 6 months ago overnight. My muscles have atrophied. I also had the flu during that time. So I lost weight. I lost muscle mass. I've lost tone. I started doing some dips and pull-ups yesterday. And I was doing about 10 pull-ups before pretty easily and very fluid motion. But when I tried to do it, I felt bound. It was hard to do. I was able to get 2 or 3 after some warm-ups of continuously trying it. but I just felt muscle bound. I felt hindered, and I don't even know how to explain it, except I just felt like my muscles were tight. I wasn't moving easily. It was hell.
Well, you're doing the
But
right thing, John. You're taking baby steps, right? And
yeah,
that's, especially when someone's starting like a new fitness routine, you just don't start off hardcore. You got to start, you have to go in baby steps. And I've done this with weights plenty of time when I haven't trained for a while and I try to get back into it. I go light, I go, even though I feel like I can do more reps and more sets because I used to do, so much weight. And I was like, no, I hold off. I know that's just enough. And next day I'm a little bit sore. And then I do it again and with something different. And gradually over time, those baby steps start to
yeah,
turn into strides and you start making some progress.
yeah, and that's I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you sometimes it feels like you take one step forward and two steps back, and a lot of that, why that happens is because you try to push it too fast, too hard, and too fast. And if you're just trying to get back, especially in concerns with exercise, you're trying to get back into shape. um, you need to approach it slowly, because if you injure yourself, you're gonna set yourself way, way back. And you don't necessarily start back from zero, though. I guess that's also another point that I'm trying to make. I have exercised throughout my life. I've been in pretty good shape for most of my life. I've always been athletic, but here I am, 50 years old, and I feel kind of bound. It's really tough, and I'm thinking I'm going to do what you're doing. I think I need to start running
You're going to
again.
take more bran. Yeah, that
Brand.
loosens things up down there. Prunes too, man. When I used to work
No,
at a
I
health
don't
food
have a
store when I
crappy
was a
situation.
kid, those old people used to come in and buy prunes all the time.
This isn't a crappy situation. I don't have any,
But
no problems there.
but
But
John, also if you're in a situation like say where you can't train and that's what your goal was to be healthier, you can pivot. Think of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, when he was probably in his prime, he tried doing an exercise called a good morning, where it was putting a lot of weight on a bar, almost like you're going to do a squat, and you bend at the waist. All right. So he
oof,
used too much weight and he screwed up his back really, really bad. Now, if you watch the Hollywood version of his life, they show him fighting in some fight and some guy kicks him in the back. That's all BS. The real thing is he hurt himself doing an exercise, but during that downtime when he couldn't train kung fu or anything, he couldn't lift weights, was the time that he wrote the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. So it gave him time to pivot and still explore his art, and his that legacy lives on and was the foundation for when he created his own art of Jeet Kune Do. So there's always a way to pivot and
yeah,
make, as you said to me earlier, make lemonade out of lemons.
yeah. I think what you're talking about too is turning something negative into something positive.
Yes.
Harnessing it's really easy to feel down about yourself when you injure yourself. But I think back about when my father was battling ALS. He had lost his voice. He was losing, the connections between his brain and the rest of his body. So his body movements were not what they were. And he couldn't eat, he couldn't drink, he had a feeding tube. Um, that's enough to get anyone down. And I remember him telling me how, and he told me actually through an iPod Touch. He had a speech assistant device, and he said he life was too short to worry about things that he's lost or things that he couldn't do anymore. He said because there was so much that he still could do, and it was better for him to focus on what he could do rather than what he could not do or couldn't do anymore. And I think that's a valuable lesson for really all of us to recognize, is that, we don't always get our way. We can't always do what we want to do, but there is plenty that we can still do for ourselves. Going back to the vision and, creating this financial vision, or my friend getting his house. He recognizes that if his car breaks down, he's going to have to do something about that, and I might set him back. But you don't really ever start. It doesn't take you all the way back to the starting place, to the first. It doesn't take you all the way back to the beginning. The only way it does that is if you haven't learned about what has happened to you in the past, and you haven't learned from that experience. If you've learned something, you carry that forward with you. Now, I know the difference between moving fluidly and feeling muscle bound. I know both feelings. And right now I'm feeling muscle bound. But I know that there's a difference. And I'm going to keep working at that until I get back to the fluidity. And I recognize it has to be incremental. It has to be baby steps. It has to be done carefully. But with no doubt, I will get there.
It's the same thing, John, when we talked about in the beginning of this show about like passive and active goals, where we're talking about, say you're addicted to something and you slip up, you just don't give in. You get back up and stand up. So if you fall down, you stand back up and try again. And, so I think that's a lot of people fight with addiction. And I think that's a big one for them. Sometimes you have to get knocked all the way down. They say you have to sink to your lowest point before you actually even do anything about it. But that you can sometimes do a fresh start, or it's like rebooting your life. You get a clean slate and say, you know what, I've gotten into a lot of trouble. I've done a lot of bad things. I've broken a lot of relationships, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to try again. And I'm going to give it my best and do the best I can.
Yeah. Kind of jumping around here. I guess our listeners are maybe used to that, but going back to the planning, and the vision, there are times when we have this vision in our heads about something we want to create. We have a picture in our heads of our future. And we are actually, dealing with what we've done in the past, as well as what can be done in the future. It limits what we think about. That limits what we do in the here and now. And all we have is really in the here and now. But there will be times when you feel like you're trying and trying and trying and never succeeding. And that can really also get you down, because it feels like you're not moving forward. You're not making progress. You're going nowhere. But as long as you keep trying, you should be learning about what not to do, or how to do something maybe a little bit differently. It's a learning process, and we all have things to learn before we get to a point of reaching a goal. There are things that we learn, but there's also an opportunity or a situation to whereas you may learn something that changes your vision. Maybe you have this, this huge goal of, I don't know. I'm just going to say being the president as an example. Maybe you want to be
anyone can
president
do it now,
of the
man.
United States. Not sure why anyone would want to do that. But you start out maybe as you're a kid, you dream about being the president of the United States. But as you grow older, you learn more about that office, about the responsibilities of the office, of the pressures that they face, how you can be maybe one of the most loved people, but also one of the most hated people. Maybe there's something that maybe something breaks the deal for you, whereas you don't want that anymore. To me, that's a good thing. Because it means that you've learned that that's something that you don't want. And then you can shift, you can pivot or shift and take another path. Back when I was in graduate school, I wanted to run a hospital. I wanted to become a CEO of a hospital. And I went to school, and I actually have 2 master's degrees, one in healthcare administration and the other in business administration. And as I was going through school, and studying, that's when managed care hit. And I was, I was working in a hospital at the time. And I realized that if, in order to support myself, I had to maybe take a different route. I couldn't take that ladder. I couldn't follow the career ladder to become a CEO of a hospital. And I decided I needed to take another route, and I did that, and it served me extremely well. But also, after I got my degrees and I was trying to work my way to the upper, administrative and executive levels of a big organization, that's when I had my first child. And when we had our first child, I realized that I really did not want I did not want my life to revolve around what I did for a living. I felt like my life needed to be focused on my children and on my family. My vision or my goals changed at that point. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's natural to, have a picture in your head about what you want, but recognize that there can be good reason for for abandoning that goal. And I don't think it's a bad thing to abandon goals for the right reasons.
No, absolutely, 100%. You pivot and you find what really means something to you. In your case, it was
Right.
your family, and I understand that because that's been my life as well.
Yeah, it's so many people I think get so hung up with goals and think that these goals are set in stone, that if they learn something that changes their mind, they feel bad about not reaching the goal. Um, Back before I met my wife, I was engaged to be married, and I soon recognized that if I was going to marry that woman, that my future would either include the grave or jail, because one of us was going to go to prison and one of us was going to be dead if we married. It was not it would not have been a good thing for me to marry this woman. And so I called off the wedding 2.5 weeks before. And it was costly. In the state of Georgia, where I lived at the time, there was, I forget what it's
Common law marriage.
common law marriage. Thank you. And it cost me money. It was almost like going through a divorce, but it was some of the best money that I ever spent in my life getting out of that relationship, because it would have probably brought children, and when you bring children into a marriage, that just changes everything. It no longer is about you and your spouse, but it becomes bigger. And I'm glad that relationship failed, because I ended up meeting my wife and having 3 children with my wife, and I wouldn't change a thing. But look at the divorce rate that we have, and it's very obvious with that divorce rate that there are people out there that know in their mind that something is not right for them, but they're committed. They agreed, they made a commitment, and I'm all for commitment and sticking with things. I think that's important. But for the right reasons, it's okay to break those commitments. It's okay to break those promises, especially when other people could be hurt in the process. If you continue on that path. There are good reasons for divorce. If you're being abused or something like that, you need to get out. Those are all personal choices to make, but I just want to again say it's okay. You learn something in the process, and you when we grow from the experience, and you carry that on from that point forward, and that will result in personal growth.
One last thing that I want to bring up, John, and I know it's getting time though where we need to wrap this up. But if you have your vision, I think it's important to clarify it and decide what exactly it is that you want. And then you could work backwards and find out what those building blocks are in order to reach and attain that goal. And I think that's something that when you sit down to write down your personal manifesto, your kick in the ass manifesto, that's important to think about.
Yeah, there's a few couple of steps, and then I know we need to wrap up. So the first step in all of this is really, it's called the pre-contemplation stage, and it's an awareness of an issue, concern, and confidence that you can do something about it. And some problems, our hands are tied. We can't change them. So why would you bother spending time and energy and worry over things that you can't change? You need to decide that for yourself. That's in the pre-contemplation stage. Once you believe that you can do something about it, then you need to start looking at the situation, analyzing it, looking what's going on. Like with me and my financial goals, the contemplation was actually listing out all the people that I owed, the credit card companies, getting a good picture of what I was up against, and then making some decisions on how best to approach solving those problems. Preparation comes after that, and that's committing to a solution, to an approach, and taking the steps, creating a plan to move forward. Then comes the action, and taking small incremental steps, measurable steps to know that you make sure that you're reaching your goals, and not being afraid to take an alternate path if it gets you to where you want to go. There are a million different ways to get from point A to point B.
As we always say, John, small steps equal big change.
Yeah. And then maintaining, how you need to think about how you're going to maintain that. Once you make a change, it doesn't we have to fight for almost everything that we do, right? I mean, look at my physical health right now. I actually have to go back. I'm taking some steps back because because of my health. That changed. That changed my exercise habit. It changed my body. I can't expect to just go back where I was before. So how I need to how are we going to maintain that? If you can't maintain that lifestyle, then you're going to lose it. So you need to think about what you're going to do to maintain it. If you gave up Diet Coke or you gave up cigarettes, recognize that is a lifestyle change. And unless you want to get back on that wagon, you really can't afford to drink that Diet Coke.
Well, that's often when we talk about accountability, and in the 10-step world, it would be a sponsor. So you hold yourself accountable some way, whether it's a friend or like I said, when I do my stairs, I take a picture every day when I go up to the top of the tower. So it's holding myself accountable. But sometimes you can't depend on yourself. Sometimes, especially if it's something that you're trying to, or something really deep, like trying to give up alcohol or drugs or smoking. Sometimes you need a friend or a sponsor.
Now, when you're taking these actions and you're taking these small steps, I think one of the silver lining in this, and I know we need to wrap up, is that we are learning throughout each of these steps. And that can also bring great clarity to your vision. So, you might have somewhat of a big picture view or, when you start, but as you start going down that path, you're going to start to see that vision gets more narrow. It gets more focused.
You refine it.
And it gets clearer over time. Yes. And that is so important for building a kick-ass plan and a kick-ass manifesto.
Well said, brother. Well, I'm Tom Stewart. I'd like you to check out swiftkickinatheass.com. Make sure you sign up for our free membership plan. You too can get out of debt like John did.
Yeah, and you can also get into better shape like our Stairmaster Tom Stewart.
Warm vanilla sugar, man. As John calls me, the white flash. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.
Peace.
Check us out on Facebook as well.
Yes, absolutely. Peace.
Peace.